Welcome to Crash Course in Commercial Real Estate. We converted our in-house training program to a podcast to teach you prospecting, negotiation, business planning, and other fundamental skills to become a successful commercial real estate agent. And now, here's your host, Brady Collier.
Welcome back to our commercial real estate training series. I'm Brady Collier. I've got Shannon here, who I'm training. And today we have Joe Magby, who works with us at NAI. And so today's episode, we're going to talk about the process of listing something and bringing it to the market. So Shannon, this is one that every detail is going to be super important because we're not going to talk about the technical side like the listing agreement necessarily on these videos, but we're just going to talk about the flow and that process and steps. And so all I told Joe, he and I have not compared notes. All I told him is name the major steps of the process of bringing a listing to the market. So I went and I wrote my steps down, and then Joe took his down. And so we're just going to dialogue about what that process looks like. All right, Joe. So I will give you mine. You don't have any notes. You have it all in your mind? Whoa.
All upstairs.
Steel trap.
I know.
That's unbelievable.
I think that's either going to prove to be very valuable or very invaluable.
We're about to find out.
Which means the same thing.
Yeah, I'm impressed because I couldn't remember mine. I'm going to go through in an overview my 5. Don't write these down yet because we'll incorporate Joe's as we go. My 5 are pre-meeting research, calling to set up the meeting, meeting the owner and touring the property, post-tour research, building your listing presentation, and then meeting to present your presentation to the owner. So, Joe, those were my 6 from that steel trap mind of yours. Did you come up with any that are different than that?
I mean, just various more detailed.
Yours
steps.
is more detailed?
Well, I just said, as far as like your pre-research would be like knowing the market, knowing what's going on. But yeah, I mean, and then as far as doing your post walkthrough research is getting the specifics on land size, building size, age, all of those little.
Well, let's go ahead and go through those details. So let's start with the pre-meeting. So say we were talking about referrals today because Shannon and I had a meeting with lenders, which we may circle up on a podcast here in just a second. But we had a meeting, say that somebody calls and says, hey, my friend has a property and it's in XYZ street and such location. Do you want to go and talk to him about bringing it to the market? And her answer, she thinks about it and she says yes. So my first one is pre-meeting research. When she gets that call, it's a referral, it's an owner, it's a referral from another agent or from another client. It's a listing that somebody calls me and I don't want to list it, and so I give it to her. Whatever it may be, whatever the sourcing of the property is, on the pre-meeting research, name some things that before you ever dive into that you're going to check into.
You can check in where it is in the market. So obviously, in Lubbock, is it on the north side? Is it on the south side? Where is it? You're going to look at, what type of asset is it? Is it land? Is it an industrial asset? Is it a retail? Is it, all those different things. And then you're going to look at what are things in that area generally going for. I like to start there. And then I also like to look at what have things in that area gone for. So you're looking at basically comps is what I would say is you're looking at, who's sold what did it sell for? Who's leased what did it lease for?
Let me drill into that one real quick and interrupt you. Sure. I actually had that exact same thing on both the pre-meeting research and the post-meeting research. I had comps or pricing research. So tell me why you would drill into pricing before even going and looking at the asset, before meeting the owner, on the pre-meeting research. Why would you look at comps? What would your goal with that be?
Generally because the owner is probably at some point when you're talking to him or her is going to say, what do you think? What do you think it would sell for? And you say, man, I know that this property traded for that. I know that that property traded for this. And so I would imagine, but let me look into this a little bit more because now that I have a better understanding of the the age of the building and how it looks in here. Let's say it's a sale. I have a better understanding of how it's going to present in the market. Some of the better. This has a 16-foot roll-up door versus that other one over there that only had 14-foot roll-up doors. Some of those little things that just can make a little bit of a difference on your pricing. But coming into that first meeting, knowing exactly your area as far as the comps and knowing exactly what the area is doing is just going to make you that much more valuable and keep you from putting your foot in your mouth.
Yeah, he said something really good there that I want to emphasize. And if you do this research before you go to the meeting, it saves you from a few things. Looking ignorant. And so one of your main reasons for pre-meeting research is to, when you get in front of the client, knowing enough to show competency. Because they may be interviewing 3 brokers. They may call 3 brokers, invite 3 brokers to come and tour the asset, and go and actually have listing presentations from 3. Joe and I have sat in competitive environments where they set up all 3 listing agreements listing presentations on the same day. And so on this first meeting, before you even go, if you slow down and take the time to research general pricing, then when you're there, while you're saying all those things, well, I know a building down the street did this land sold for this did this, it just makes you look really competent, and it starts the relationship off right. So it avoids looking ignorant, because if they say, what do you think it's going to go for? The worst case scenario is you haven't done any research, you don't know, and you throw out a number, it's vastly different than their expectation, and it starts it off on the wrong foot. And so I like to say, I'm going to give you a really broad range. It could be, it could be $80 a foot, or it could be $120 a foot. But it really depends on certain specifics, which is exactly what Joe said.
Yeah, I like to say, it depends on about a billion things. It's just like, if I was going to build a house, what does it cost to build a house? Well, it depends. Do you want the gold-plated toilets or no? And so all of those things come into account. But yeah, having that in your mind of here's the range of what this type of asset normally trades for around this area just makes you that much more dangerous. And it also keeps you from exactly the same thing of putting out this big high number, this really low ball number, and then they whip out their appraisal that they had done 5 or 6 years ago. Well, we thought it was this, and then you look like a fool.
What you don't want to do is, in that early on while you're in the meeting or whatever, you don't want to commit to a price. You want to go back. But let's stay in the pre-meeting research. I want to give you a few others. As soon as you get the referral, the call from the owner, whatever it may be, first thing, I'm going to go to the Central Appraisal District. I'm going to pick the property. I'm going to look at the ownership, because you would think if you weren't in commercial real estate, ownership's simple. The person who calls me owns the asset. It's way more complex than that. When they call and they say, I want you to price such and such asset for me, and then you go to the appraisal district, there could be 3-5 different things that you find on the appraisal district website regarding just the ownership. Joe, what would be a few that come to your mind on who could be the owners? Who owns what? So we used to own this 10 acres, but now, when so-and-so died, then it actually passed along to this person and that person. And so this guy that you're talking to thinks he owns all 10, but actually his sister owns the other back 6, and that's going to change things. Or it could be in a trust.
Right.
And then you got to know who's the trustee, who has the power of the pen to execute the documents. One time Grant and I were working on a property, to your point, where we were talking to the son, and as it turns out, the owner, when he died, had left it to the daughter. And the entire time the son is talking to us about selling the asset, and a competitor got it because they were actually talking to the decision maker. And so terrible mistake on ours and the son. Yeah, it's a complicated story, but so it could be in a trust. There could have been some change in ownership, or it could be in an entity. And if it's not in that person's name within that entity, that person you're talking to has to have the power of pen to execute the listing agreement and to make sure that they have the authority to actually sell the building. So it sounds simple, but I would go to the tax roll. What else are you going to get off the tax roll?
Maybe age of any assets you have. That's a pretty good place to start. Exact square footage or acreage. The exact square footage can be here or there, but the acreage should be pretty much right on. You're going to get if it's an asset that's going to be sold as like a leased asset, then getting the tax roll information is going to be important. It's not super critical for that first meeting, but just as much information as you can glean off there is.
Yeah, it's only a couple of pages on the tax roll, but you're going to get ownership information. You're going to get the size of the asset, and you can look and you can say, well, it was built in 1957, but then there was another structure added in 1962 and another structure added in 1999 or something nothing like that because they kept expanding. And so whenever you're looking at, so then when you walk into the asset, you're like, well, this doesn't look original. Well, they don't know you went and looked at the tax roll. You're like, was this added on later? And they're like, oh, well, it actually, and then all of a sudden you look smart because you noticed something that they wouldn't have expected because they thought they did this great construction. So
and you can also, another thing you can also see is you can also see when they maybe bought it. So, how long have you owned it? Well, we owned it since yada yada. Well, but it actually traded hands 5 years ago, and maybe they don't know, maybe they do know, and all those little things can come into play.
So whomever gives you the call, and can you come and look at this building downtown with me? Yeah, sure. Give me a few details on the property real quick. Let me just confirm I've got the right property address, and when I meet you there, where am I going to meet you? And then who's using the property now? So you find out if it's owner occupied building, if there's a tenant in there, and you find out what type of asset it is, obviously on the phone or on the LCAD, because you want to do your research based on vacancy in that product type. So he just said he's going to say a lot of things about properties that have sold. But if somebody says a downtown office space and you don't know the vacancy of downtown office space, then he wonders, are you the person who's dealing in that asset class? Well, it may just be that those things are changing all the time. There's resources you can go and look, and vacancy reports and so on and so forth. So you want to say what asset class is it? Educate yourself on what's going on with that asset class in that location. You want to get the ownership information, and you want to get as much details on the property. And this is all before your meeting. So I labeled that the pre-meeting research. Number two, if it came from a referral source, then I put step two, which may have been one that you did or didn't identify, is you're calling to set the meeting and setting expectations on the phone call that I need to see the property so that I can, so I can understand the specifics on the property. And so I like to clarify with that phone call, I'm not bringing a listing agreement. I'm not coming to list the property. I just need to see the asset to where I can do some accurate pricing. So you're going to do pre-meeting research. If it's a referral, you're going to call the owner and say, hey, I'd like to come and see your building. So-and-so told me to call you. I just need to come and see the building so that I can work up my presentation for the listing. And so I like to set expectations on that call. This is not the listing. This is so that I can get information for my presentation. They should respect that, because if they go to a doctor, as the analogy I've used in other podcasts, if they go to a doctor, they expect the doctor to ask them a lot of questions, drill into the details before he makes a diagnosis. So I don't like it when people give a call, carry a listing agreement, sign it up without doing plenty of research to make sure you set expectations real clearly. This whole process is about setting expectations and then exceeding those expectations.
Yeah, and it's also another thing where you price something based on pictures they've sent you, or based off of Google Earth, or based off of whatever, and you haven't seen it, and then the first call you get is from a prospective buyer or tenant, and they say, well, what does it look like in there? And you say, it looks really good based off of the pictures, and then you show it to them and it looks like this or all of those other things, and so you just look like a fool. So it's better to be able to actually get eyes on it before anything goes on to paper or starts getting penciled up into agreements or things.
That's great. Really busy agents, what they do is, hey, I want to list my property on so-and-so, and they've worked with the client before, and so it's repeat business. Oh, yeah, sounds great. I'll type up a listing agreement and I'll get it over to you. And so they don't go look at the property. They don't go through any of these steps, and then when they bring it to the market, they look like a fool. And so I'm going to go ahead and cover my third one, or I want to introduce my third one. After you call to set up the meeting, the next natural step is to meet the owner and tour the property. And this one of all of them has the most points for me because, Joe, let's talk about an office building, just as an example. If you're going to look at a downtown office building, what things would you be looking for? Why would you need to see the asset before sending over the listing agreement?
I'm thinking about all of the, if I'm thinking about pricing, I'm thinking about all of the questions that, if I'm selling the building, I'm thinking about all the questions that the buyers are going to ask me, or the buyer's agents are going to ask me. Access, parking, size, how many floors, what's the condition of the elevator, what's the condition of the hallway space, what's the condition of the restroom. All of those questions I want to know because that's going to affect my pricing big time. If it's
let me just stop you there and drill into condition, because you just rolled off so many different things, and I just want to stop at condition. It doesn't matter if it's an industrial building, if it's a retail building, if it's an office building, apartment complex. You've got to go see the asset to assess the condition. It could have been built in 1950, and be in an amazing condition, like that office building downtown that you've been working on. Amazing condition, well kept, presents great, but it's old. Or it could be relatively new, but not well kept, and the property condition could be terrible. So you're looking for all kinds of things to determine the property condition.
And that way, again, you don't look like a fool. And also, it's also about setting the expectations for your client too, or this prospective client. When you go back to them and you say, I think it's worth X, whatever that number is, then you've done all your research and you've looked through it, so you know that you don't have to take it out and then have some nasty conversations with prospective buyers where you take something out for $1 million and they say, I wouldn't pay $1 million for that. I'd only pay $500,000 for that. You guys are crazy. And then you have to go back now and over, after 2 weeks or 30 days or however long, and say, man, we overpriced this thing, and you've got egg on your face. So it's all those little things that you're trying to, you're assessing condition, and you're asking the question about how easy is it going to be for somebody else in this asset class to grab this thing and use it.
So deferred maintenance would be a huge one. If you're looking at an office building or a retail shopping center and you're walking through the space, because that's the right thing to do, you're walking through the space and you see acoustic ceiling tiles with brown rings and every other, what does that tell you? It tells you, hey, have you had this roof looked at? Is this new water penetration, or is it, actually we had the roof replaced last year? Well, knowing that the roof was replaced is really important to you as the agent, because you want to say new roof on your marketing materials where everybody knows there's no deferred maintenance. Otherwise, if everybody else walks in and sees all those, they're going to be, and you're going to tell the person when you do the listing presentation, hey, it's going to cost us $100 to go replace all those acoustic tiles. We don't want anybody thinking there's deferred maintenance. So property condition, it could be any one of 100 things.
And that's also a good reason to look at the appraisal district as well, to know the age of the building, because if it was built in the 1960s, then your question is, do you have an asbestos report? Right. Is there asbestos in here? That's another one of those things that okay, based on this age, this is something that everyone's going to be curious about, and so we need to have. Nothing's a deal. I always say nothing's a deal breaker. It's just let's know about it beforehand before we go try to find, a prospective buyer or tenant or something like that.
Yeah, so. That's right. Another one that I've got is functional obsolescence. I could have two apartment complexes side by side, and they look the same on the outside, but when you walk into one, all of the units have this really open concept floor plan, and this other one, all of the units have a bunch of hallways and just things that you just can't afford to go in and remodel a whole apartment complex. Same thing with older office buildings. And a lot of times properties were used this way in the 50s, and now there's a totally different use of structure. And so that's something, if they just call you and you just take it to the market, if you don't go and see it, you wouldn't see the functional obsolescence where things have changed. And you just have to take that into account on your pricing. If it's a leased asset, then the market's already given you that feedback. There's a reason that one's leased for $14 a foot and this one's leased for $24 a foot, even they look the same on the outside, same general location. The market has said, this one's hard for us to use. It's got some functional obsolescence to it. But if it's not a leased, it's an owner-occupied asset, you have to assess, how are people going to use this building? And it's going to take a massive amount of money to bring it up to current use expectations.
Sometimes you get, just a word to the wise, sometimes you get folks that have older buildings, or they have kind of oddball asset classes, or for whatever reason they get kind of cagey about showing you certain things or about letting you see certain things. I've experienced this a lot, especially doing workforce housing in the Permian, where people are like, I don't want you to see my books, and it's like, well, it's tough for me to price what you're doing without seeing this. So I would just be wary of folks that are kind of cagey or just kind of secretive, because if they're keeping secrets from you, they're going to keep secrets from buyers.
That's a lawsuit waiting to happen.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's trouble brewing.
So we want to be somebody's partner in this process of moving their asset. And so, because that's the case, if they're being secretive, if something's going on legit, you just need to walk and refer that to your worst enemy. Okay, I'm going to say one last thing. Do you have anything else on, while you're on site with the owner touring the property, anything else you think of? I'm going to close it with this one, if not.
I like to take as many pictures as I can. Just take my phone, take as many pictures as I can. It helps with marketing down the road, but it also jogs your memory as people are asking you, what's the size of, what's the eave height or whatever, and you know that the doors are X foot. So, okay, well, looking at it, I think it's about Y for the eave height. You know, it just jogs your memory on certain things, because if you're looking at 100 buildings or whatever, it can get, what was the layout of this space, and how did that was one wonky door in the back, what was the story with that? You have the pictures there. It just jogs my memory a little bit better. So, and you're already on site, so it's just an easy way of killing two birds with one stone.
Yeah, a lot of times, especially if it's an out-of-market deal, if it's a long ways away, get as many pictures as possible, because we may not be able to send Amanda, the marketing team down there to take the pictures. If it's a Lubbock asset, normally we're not going to use your cell phone pictures for the marketing flyer. We're going to send Amanda after you get it listed, and she's going to go take the pictures to make a really nice flyer. But I do like what he said, because to build your listing presentation, a lot of times you want to slap a picture of their property on the listing presentation. So you'll use the ones when you're walking up, you take a picture. When you're walking out, you take a picture, and a few inside. You can incorporate those into your listing presentation. So I like the idea of taking pictures, especially if it's out of town. Take as good of pictures as possible in case the marketing staff doesn't go and do that for you. Okay, that's my first three. I'm gonna call it quits for this episode. We're going to do a second one, listings number 2. Before we go, there's a lot there as far as pre-meeting research, calling to set the meeting. Oh, I'm sorry. I need to say one more thing on meeting the owner while you're thinking about your genius questions. Setting expectations for the listing. You have the decision maker in front of you normally, unless they have their office manager or something let you in, which is fine. But if you have them, you need to set every step of this process. I've got 6 steps. Every step of the process, you're creating value in the client's mind, and you're setting expectations for the next step in the process. So when you take the call, you're setting expectations for the on-site visit. While you're at the on-site visit, you're setting expectation for the listing meeting. So while you're there with them, you're like, okay, I'm going to go back to my office, and you're going to lay out for them a clear path of what your workflow is going to look like. So that they know what the path is. So you're taking all the uncomfortableness out of it. So while you're on site with them, you want to set expectations for the listing meeting. Hey, I'd like to have you to my office. What you did there is you just framed in their mind that the listing presentation is going to be in your office, not on site. And we'll talk about that in a second. Say, I'd like to have you to my office. I'm going to go back and relook at all the comps and make sure my pricing is really accurate. So I'm going to incorporate that into my listing presentation for you to make sure we nail the pricing. I'm going to, and so on and so forth. I'm going to take into account all of the things I've seen on site as we price the asset, probably call some appraisers. So you're telling them, okay, I'm going to go back to my office now, and I'm going to do some more work to make sure that I'm nailing this thing. So the last thing I put in the property tour with the owner was setting expectations for the meeting. That's what I had as last. Did you have anything else?
Yeah. I would say that if you're, and also you're getting a sense of this person's communication style. It's going to be critical down the road as well. But you're setting their expectation. Yeah, I can't put it any better than that. So
and then you would also want to, Joe just mentioned environmental, great point. And you would also say, hey, this is a great property. This is going to be successful, just to make sure that I nail the pricing and so on and so forth. Do you have any appraisals? Like, for example, we went down to that office building downtown, the 3 of us did. And I asked the owner, hey, can I have a copy of that appraisal? Because he pulled his appraisal out of his drawer. Last time I had this look, said, hey, there's a lot of valuable information in there. There's footprint drawings. There's, blah, blah, blah. There's other comps that the appraiser found. Do you mind if I get a copy of that just to make sure that my presentation is accurate? So you want copies of environmental, of property condition assessments, pricing, anything that you can get that they have, you want to request that on site. And if they don't make a copy, say, well, here's my card. Just shoot it to me in an email so that I can incorporate that into my research. So that's another thing is asking them for.
You can't go wrong with you can't get too much information. I mean, like, that's a dumb thing to say. You can, but it's difficult to get too much information. So as much information as possible as you can get out of that meeting, it's just going to, the whole rest of the process is going to be that much smoother.
Yeah, totally agree. Okay, so join us on the next one. That is listing presentation process number 1, and we're going to go straight into number 2.